The next topic I want to discuss is materializations. And we've touched on this a bit previously. Remember, we went into our project and we saw materialize as view was the default. So it was creating everything as a view in our staging models. And what we say here is it's more than just tables and views. Those are the most common ones, what we've mentioned so far. But there actually are a few others. So I just want to take a moment to go through and explain these so you have an awareness of what the different options are for materializing or building your models a certain way. Remember, models are those SQL files, but they can be materialized or created in different ways. So there's four out of the box that come with DBT. It's view, table, incremental, and ephemeral. You can create custom materializations if you want. That's an advanced feature. We're not going to cover that here, but that is an option. But let's look at the default ones. First, we have a view. And as we mentioned before, this is the default setting. And this is going to deploy a create view statement based on your query in DBT. This type of materialization will deploy the fastest. And by that, I mean in your DBT run, it's going to build the fastest. But potentially you could have slower query times because it's going to run that query every single time and not be, as quick as maybe a table directly. Which leads to number two, which is table. And what this is going to do is create a table and insert the data based on the SQL query in your model. And by default, this is going to completely rebuild and reload your table every single time. So this is fast to query because you're going to have a table, but also potentially slow to deploy because if you have billions or multiple gigabytes of data, if you're trying to rebuild and reload this every time, that could get a little cumbersome. So that's something to be aware of, and you have to just pick and choose what works for you. Third is incremental, and that is going to create a table. It's similar to the table, but it's only going to insert newly updated data based on the query and a specific column that you provide. So you could create an incremental table based on a date, based on maybe some IDs, something that made the most sense. Only update the table based on a specific create by date, something like that. This is going to be fast to query, obviously, because it's just like a table. And it's also going to deploy fast because it's only running the latest incremental data records that you determine. But it's a little bit more complex to configure. You have to add some more settings. So that's a little overhead there. And last but not least, we have ephemeral, which is different than the other three in the sense that those first three will actually be deploying a database object to your database server. So we would have a view or a table, but ephemeral is just creating an internal CTE for you. Remember, we're going to be using CTEs a lot in DBT, and ephemeral is kind of a shortcut way to do it. So rather than having, let's say, a really long, complex CTE within your model script, maybe you want to break it out so it's a little easier to manage, but you can still use that ref function to refer to it. But essentially under the hood, it's just going to be creating a glorified CTE for you within your query. It's just more of a way for organization. Ultimately, these are the main ways that you'll see materializations used in your project. You can set them at the model level, at the project level, whatever you want to do using that materialized attribute.